Hello, I'm Joe Devine from the Tifo Football Podcast, and I'm here today to introduce Adam Leventhal on the Athletics Premier League Countdown Podcast. Adam has been celebrating the return of the 2019-20 season, which is only days away, by releasing 20 podcasts on the Ornstein and Chapman feed, each one dedicated to a different Premier League team. That's 2 podcasts a day, every day, up until football returns. Today's episode is Watford, and Adam is switching role from host to interviewee. We've already released shows for all the previous teams, so you can catch up with those on this podcast feed or ad-free via the Athletic app. If you're not already a subscriber, you can sign up right now and get 40% off an annual subscription by going to theathletic.com/Tifo to enjoy the best football writing anywhere. Adam, of course, also participates on From the Rookery End, the Athletics Watford-specific podcast, which has been running episodes all season and throughout lockdown. So make sure you check that out and listen back to some recent special episodes. So, without further ado, here's the fantastic Adam Leventhal. Adam Leventhal, welcome to your own podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm sort of slightly trepidatious because being an interviewee rather than the interviewer is a little bit more challenging. But if you can go easy on me, then I'd be very grateful because it has been quite an arduous journey getting through all these podcasts.
Well, I'm glad this comes right at the end. So in a way, you know, it's a bit like your swan song. Let's start with an easy one. With that in mind, you went to a game of football at the weekend. What on earth was that like?
It was sort of partly soul-destroying, but also quite heartening, if those two things can exist in the same way. In terms of simple logistics, it was very, very straightforward. There weren't any sort of crowds to get through. There wasn't more traffic around Vicarage Road. It was obviously, you know, a stark reminder of the situation that we've been in. Being so close to Watford General Hospital, which is, you know, still fully operational, and there's still, casualties of coronavirus, hoping to recover on the wards there. You have to walk up, have your temperature checked, go through a medical questionnaire. You have to wear a mask when you go into the ground. Face coverings have to be worn at all times. You're sat 2 meters apart from your colleagues. There's obviously no fans in there. You can hear everything that is said, which is very, very interesting. I found that one of the most interesting things about the game. And, you know, having spoken to Ben Foster in the build-up to the game, he was saying that the team are trying to sort of trial out things to get them G'd up. And it was very noticeable that he was very, very loud. And, you know, if there was, you know, Kiko Sánchez going forward on the right-hand side, or Christian Cabasele had, you know, recovered well to intercept the ball, he was very, very vocal in his support. And I just wonder whether they're thinking, look, let's almost be the crowd ourselves at times and don't be backwards in coming forwards in terms of the encouragement that we're giving each other, because no one else is going to be giving us any encouragement.
Right, and you don't think that's something that gets like lost in the normal crowd noise, and you just don't hear?
Well, yes, I think that there is that, but now they only have the option to be supplying it themselves. And yeah, we never know exactly, because it completely gets lost because you have that murmur of the crowd, or you have, you know, a very, very loud crowd not that often at Vicarage Road this season, but at times. But I think that, you know, they have to now approach it differently, and they need to be able to stimulate themselves, to remind themselves that they are in a relegation scrap. They can't coast in these final 9 games. They are right up against it. So I think they have to sort of, I think there was another thing that Ben Foster had said, and it was related to the crowd noise that was played in sort of an intra-squad friendly that they played on the Tuesday prior to the Saturday game against Brentford. And it was almost as if he was a little bit embarrassed that there was crowd noise being played during the game when the ball went out of play. And he basically said that it was really, really annoying. But I think that what the players have to do, if they are going to be encouraging their teammates on the field and doing it even more than normal, they have to sort of leave their shame at the door a little bit and think, look, we can only look after ourselves here. So don't try and sort of style it out and be cool. And, with your opponents, it's all a bit of a strange atmosphere and we're effectively playing a friendly match. Forget that. No one else is going to look after you. So, if you're going to shout louder, do it, and it may well pay off. And it might be the 1% that might push Watford over the line. Maybe a bit of an advantage there. That's interesting. Well, I mean, you've referenced this already in the sense that Watford cannot coast for these final games. But let's go back to March, before the lockdown. How were Watford doing then? They were doing better than they had done in the first section of the season. Obviously, they were into their third head coach after Javi Gracia, and then Quique Sánchez Flores, two head coaches that basically failed, unfortunately for them. And Nigel Pearson, that initial boost that he gave the club was essential to getting Watford into this position that they are in now, outside of the relegation zone. I think it was 4 wins out of 5. They beat Manchester United, they beat Wolves, and then after that they did sort of revert a little bit to how they'd been doing before, and they lost 3 out of 4. They lost 2 in the last minute against Aston Villa and Everton. But then, just prior to the lockdown, there was that amazing win against Liverpool, which came out of nowhere. But it really did show that anything can happen. And it was a fantastic performance. And I think one of the subplots to it is the fact that Ismail Assar, who's been, not a revelation because people knew about him at Rennes before, but it's shown how vital he is to this Watford side, because he not only is important for the team when he has the ball, it's when he doesn't have the ball and players around him have it, the opponents are worried about where he's going to go. And I think they are a little bit more conservative because they know that he can get in behind. And I think that overall that really does help Watford, defensively and also going forward. So he is back, he is fit, and he's going to be a key player for Watford this season.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's come back and talk about Sarr and other key players too. Beforehand, I mean, obviously the ambition is to avoid relegation. Key fixtures in the lead up to that, Adam, and how likely do you think that this is? How confident are you? I'll put it that way.
I'd like to say that I'm a glass half full person, but I'm not sort of like painfully negative, but I still can't quite believe that Watford are in the Premier League anyway. So I haven't quite sort of advanced into the fact that other people think, oh yeah, we're an established Premier League team. I'm always quite impressed that we play against Liverpool and Manchester United. So yeah. In terms of the fixtures, it's a tough start against Leicester. I think they'll be targeting the other 4 home games that they have, against Southampton, against Norwich, and then against Newcastle. They do have a game against Manchester City, which is, it could go any way really in terms of how many Manchester City score. But I think those 3 home games are going to be essential for Watford to win. They have to win those games, because I think it's going to be very, very tight. They've only got 27 points on the board. They're going to need to probably get up to 40 points to survive. So they have to be collecting points at home. And then, a game that I think is probably earmarked by West Ham fans, and also for Watford fans, certainly, the away game at London Stadium to play West Ham. West Ham are also in trouble. So that might be one that could result in either side going down if they haven't been in good form. So I don't know. It's an incredible sort of position to be in, having to fight against relegation in such a sterile atmosphere. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it all pans out, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 3 in a row, which I think potentially is a make or break point for Watford's season. You're at home to Norwich, then you're at home to Newcastle, and we were speaking just before we started recording actually about Newcastle's run-in. Maybe you can revisit that as well, Adam, and then the West Ham game. You feel like if those games go badly, that's it for Watford, right? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, they have to. I mean, who knows what Norwich are going to do? And I know that Michael Bailey has spoken very positively about Norwich's chances. They've got nothing to lose. They may as well, go for it, and they've got some good players. Watford will have to beat Norwich in that game. Newcastle's run is very, very interesting. Obviously, off the pitch, you've obviously gone into detail on the Saudi potential takeover in one of your wonderful videos. So pat on the back for that.
Thank you.
But that is a distraction. And I think their run-in is very intriguing as well, because if memory serves, they sort of go from playing a team in the top six, or the teams that are going to be fighting for European football, and then they flip straight into a team that is battling against relegation. So they don't really have many games against teams that they would hope to be included in the bracket of sort of being middling and safe. So I'm not 100% sure whether they won't get sucked in to the relegation scrap, but I mean that might be disproved early doors, and they'll pick up a couple of wins and they'll be safe. And then if they are, then that will be a bonus for Watford, because they will need to win that game against Newcastle heading into the game at the London Stadium. So it's very tense indeed.
Can you imagine if Newcastle do get relegated a day after the acquisition bid finally gets accepted by the Premier League? That would be, or maybe they'll just hand it off. Maybe that's their idea. Wait until Newcastle get relegated and then hand it off to the Football League to decide instead.
Yes.
What an interesting conspiracy theory. Okay, we've talked about Ismaila Sarr. Other key players for Watford. Who are going to be your most important players going forwards for the next 9 games, Adam?
I think obviously you have to look at the captain, Troy Deeney. He was doing pretty well before lockdown. He'd come back from that injury. He scored 6 goals. There's a couple of assists as well. It's been interesting to watch this Watford side this season once again be so reliant on him. And I think that, one of the key subplots for the team, and to be honest, it has been for the last couple of seasons, they need to come up with a plan of Deeney's succession, which they haven't quite grasped yet, because he is such a sort of a talismanic leader and he gets everyone pumped up. He's going to be important. I think another player that is going to potentially be important, especially with so many games coming thick and fast, 3 in the first 8 days, is Danny Welbeck. He looked pretty fit and lively when he played in that friendly match that I went to see behind closed doors. He was actually operating on the left-hand side where Gerard Deulofeu had obviously been playing very well up until he got his injury. So he might be an option on the left. And also he was quite keen to sort of join in as a second striker. And I think that's really important for Watford, that Troy Deeney actually operates better in a partnership. So if there is the opportunity for Welbeck, who's obviously more naturally a striker rather than a flank player. I know he's operated a lot for Manchester United and for Arsenal on a flank, and for England as well. But, he is a striker as well. He likes to get into the box. So if he can join in, that would be very good. I think also another player that I'm interested to see, especially now that Watford have, that 5 substitution option, is João Pedro, who arrived from Brazil. And he's actually he's bulked up a little bit, and he came on in the second half against Brentford and looked really good. He's got, great sort of attacking instincts, and he's quite confident. So I think there might be a few players on the periphery that, like for all clubs, will get more of an opportunity. And because there isn't going to be the pressure of playing in front of big crowds who might be very quick to sort of mumble and groan, the fact that they're not going to be there, they might just be able to sort of have a bit more confidence, and they might try a few things that are the reasons that they're at the football club in the first place. So we'll have to see if maybe João Pedro, maybe Domingos Quina as well sort of gets an opportunity. So there are reasons to be cheerful for Watford, but there are also a lot of reasons to be fearful as well at the same time.
That's football. Okay, so of course every remaining game is going to be televised live. For listeners who haven't seen Watford too often this season, what should they be looking out for?
Under Pearson, defensive discipline, which was hugely lacking in the beginning part of the season under Javi Gracia. Quique Sánchez Flores obviously brought in a little bit more solidity, but he sort of chopped off the attacking arm of the side and made the defensive legs very, very strong. And Pearson seems to have got that balance a lot better. There are still obviously question marks over the defence, maybe a little bit creaky, a little bit slow to turn if you've got attackers, getting in behind. But then other than that, there is a lot of positive elements to that Watford side. Etienne Capoue is languid in style, but he is someone that can actually drive the team forward, and he's got a great engine. The same as Abdoulaye Doucouré, technically very, very good, very keen to get box to box. You've got experienced players as well, like, Will Hughes and Tom Cleverley, who are also in the mix. And then, Ismail Assar, who, we mentioned a little bit earlier on, he is so important to Watford in this final run-in, because when he plays, he not only sort of pushes the opponents back, but he is also a supply line, and he's excellent at getting the ball in the box, and that's what Watford were lacking with when he wasn't in the side. And he also scores goals, 4 goals in 9 games, 3 assists in that time as well, 2 against Liverpool. And when he was out, Watford really, really did miss him. So in terms of the style of play, it can be very, very attractive. Especially when the likes of Sarr are on song and Doucouré as well. So look out for the fullbacks as well. Kiko Femenia has got lightning wheels. Adam Messina down the left-hand side has been a sort of a revelation this season, coming in on the left-hand side rather than Jose Holebas. So there are moments when Watford can be very, very attractive, but also because over the course of this season, their confidence have taken so many hits, they don't have to, it doesn't take them long, I should say, to maybe sort of suffer a big dent. But then who knows, if the fact that there aren't going to be crowds there, they don't feel that weight as much as they had done earlier on in the season, then maybe they might recover better. But I think just in general, for all teams, the team that goes behind in games, it just seems to be more of a struggle to get back on level terms, I think, because you haven't got the crowd sort of pushing you forward. So I don't know, maybe they might have to crank up the fake crowd noise a little bit more. Maybe that might actually, rather than annoying them, it might do a good job. I don't know. We'll
drown everything out. Yeah. It's time for the impossible question now, Adam. How do you predict they will fit? Well, where do you predict they will finish? I suppose really we could simplify this and say, are they going to stay up?
I genuinely don't know. I really, really don't know. I'm not sort of trying to sort of put low expectations, because I genuinely think they are going to stay up and it'll be comfortable. I really, genuinely have no idea whatsoever. Those first 3 games for Watford, at home against Leicester, away against Burnley, and then at home against Southampton, if they can pick up 4 points from those first 3 games, then I think they will be in with a shout of staying up. Obviously, they've got to go to Chelsea. They finish at Arsenal as well, and they've got Manchester City. And then we talked about those 3 games to come against Norwich, Newcastle and West Ham. But if they can have something to sort of grab hold of early doors, and the teams below them take a few hits as well, then I think they're very, very capable of staying up, but I simply don't know, because I'm not sure how other teams around them are going to react to being in the same situation. So I'm sorry, I'm massively on the fence, sitting there with my head in my hands.
No, I think it's a dignified place to be.
Adam, let's talk about Quique Sánchez Flores, because the anatomy of his sort of 2 months back at the club is still a little bit mysterious. I mean, first of all, what was the original aim of bringing him back? And secondly, how did it deteriorate throughout that period? And what were the decisive points within the relationship which led to him leaving again?
I think first and foremost, it was a surprise that Watford were willing to offer the olive branch, because you'll remember when he left previously, there seemed to be a pretty sort of catastrophic breakdown in the relationship. And it was interesting that, Gino Pozzo and Scott Duxbury and Filippo Giraldi, the technical director, the owner and the chairman, for people who aren't familiar, that they were prepared to try it. They knew that they needed someone to bring defensive solidity to the side. That was something that he did very well in his first spell, the first season that Watford were in the Premier League. So they thought, okay, let's go to him. But it seemed as if they had a little bit of blindness to the fact that their relationship had broken down. But in the same regard, there is also the argument that, you know, getting things out in the open, if you're going to sort of get back together with someone, if you sort of lay everything on the table, then there is nothing to hide from. So it seemed as if at the very start of it, the relationship had been built, but the problem was that he didn't have as much credit in the bank due to the fact that his first season had finished and fizzled out a little bit, and obviously there had been those moments when the hierarchy and he hadn't seen eye to eye. So I think the fact that he didn't start off with a win early on, which he could have done against Arsenal, it was so close. If Abdoulaye Doucouré had scored a winner, having come back from 2-0 down, that could have changed the dynamic. There were also games when Watford should have won at home, which could have changed it far earlier. I remember a game against Sheffield United, they drew 0-0. Andre Gray had a great opportunity. Danny Welbeck had a great opportunity one-on-one. Craig Dawson also last minute. It was over the bar, tipped over the bar. You know, he didn't get much luck, and he did actually bring what he was supposed to bring. He also had a subplot of players being out injured. Obviously, he didn't have Deeney. He didn't have Sarr for quite a long time. So a lot of things contributed to making Watford less potent going forward, which was out of his control. However, there was just so much focus on the fact that, yes, they're better defensively, aside from the 8-0 defeat against Manchester City, of course. Yeah. But that was an interesting one, the Man City game, because I thought that was a really big error from Quique, because, you know, having started well against Arsenal, it was almost as if he naively treated Manchester City away as an opportunity to try out the rest of his defensive options. So he made a huge amount of changes. He brought Adrian Mariappa into the back four. No criticism of him, but there was no reason to change things. He played Dimitri Folkier out on the right hand side in a sort of a revamped defensive line. It was just a bad call, and that really took, well, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 games to get over. And then eventually, just prior to an international break, I think it was, they beat Norwich, which sort of kept him clawing on. But I think he just became frustrated. I don't think he really realised the struggle that he was getting himself into. And I think that was ultimately what broke it down. And it was a shame, because I think, you know, he's a good guy. I went out to speak to him for The Athletic out in Madrid, and you know, his heart was in it. He wanted everything to go well, but I think it's sort of, you know, you go back to the old saying of never go back, and I think in this circumstance it had genuine red flags even before he'd signed to say, yeah, this is one that fits into that category. Don't do it. But they went ahead with it, and then I suppose they had to make that brave call and say, look, this really isn't working. Let's jettison him. And even if he's not here and we haven't got someone lined up, it's better to not have him here and try something different than keeping him on, because Troy Deeney actually spoke about it and said, look, it just smacked of nostalgia, and it was a waste of 10 games, and that's what's left them in the hole that they're in at the moment.
Was that kind of a majority position within the dressing room? Was there any kind of, I know that sort of he didn't return to manage a lot of the players that he'd left, but was there pushback from the rest of the team?
I think there were Quique loyalists, and unsurprisingly, they were, you know, the Spanish players.
Not Jose Holebas.
Not Jose Holebas. But then even, you know, it was funny with Holebas, and I think that he does get a bad sort of rep sometimes. I mean, he doesn't help himself because he's surly and throws his hands up in the air and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, his problem is that he's just not the player that he was. He can't move around as quickly, and he's a lot older than he was originally. So even if he does want to fight, he can't actually get into the position to do that because he's not quick enough, which is a shame for him. But even he got back into a decent relationship with Quique. He showed that he was committed to the cause, and there was proof there. That players, if you do have a fallout, for people that don't know, he did have a big fallout before with Quique, and it was almost sort of doomed to fail once again. But he did a decent job. But then, the likes of Gerard Deulofeu, who was played a lot more during Quique's time centrally as a central striker because of Troy Deeney missing. He was obviously very sad to see him go. Kiko Femenia, who didn't actually play very well when Quique was there and has played a lot better since under Nigel Pearson. He was disappointed as well. But I think they probably just thought, and there were a fair few players that did remain from Quique's first spell in charge. They probably thought, yeah, this is just not working. This isn't working. We need something different. And I suppose, not in a sort of a xenophobic way, but a lot of that was driven from the English players. And they were simply saying, look, we are genuinely in a relegation scrap. We've never been in this position before under the Pozzos. We need to get someone English in who's going to give us some sort of basic grit and fight and do the ugly things and not worry about looking good. We just need to get out of it. Led by sort of Ben Foster and Troy Deeney and Will Hughes and Tom Cleverley. Although they are players that are capable of playing under a foreign coach and to different styles, I think it was very clear that this was it. We have to make a change now, otherwise we're not going to have any chance, and we will go down with potentially not winning another game. So yeah, it broke down overall. I don't think there was massive hard feelings. There wasn't sort of punch-ups and things like that. It wasn't that sort of feeling, but I think they just sort of thought, look, we have to change something now, and the Pearson marriage was instigated.
I'm going to delve into the loan network, if you don't mind. One of the players that fascinates me in Watford's system is Cucho Hernandez, Colombian forward. He's currently on loan at Mallorca. A few years ago, those who knew best could have described him as a kind of a reinvention of Sergio Aguero, and there seemed to be a kind of a clear roadmap for his Watford future in terms of integrating him back into English football, or into English football for the first time. What's his status at the club? Is he? It seems to me, just from a glance, that there's a kind of a little bit of a work permit issue, possibly. But what's the plan with him? And is his stock just as high as it ever was?
I think there are now firm plans for him to come into the squad for pre-season, whenever that's going to be this year.
Yeah.
And over the last 12 months, the sort of the plan has been put in place to start to integrate him into getting his mind into the fact that he is going to become a Watford player. That has been slightly complicated on two fronts. Firstly, because he was injured for the first sort of section of this season.
I think he's only started about 15 games or something in the whole of the season, something like that.
Exactly. So that was... that was sort of combined because he first was seen at Watford's training ground doing some fitness work and things like that. But I think they also used that as an opportunity to help with his integration. So he came to a couple of Watford games so he could see the ground. Obviously, he was spending time at the training ground as well. And the next complication is that it will depend on the status that Watford hold by the end of this season. So if I don't necessarily think it's critical that Watford stay up for him to become part of the Watford squad, because I think he could probably have a really good season in the Championship. It just depends how vocal his agent wants to be. But he's been part of the Pozzo family for 4 years now. Coming in at Granada and then going out on loan, and then he was sort of handed back to Watford from Granada when the ownership changed. He had that season at Huesca, in the lower league in Spain, scored 16 goals. And then he had those goals that he scored, which were very, very notable against Barcelona and against Real Madrid when Huesca got into La Liga. I mean, it was weird that he scored after 3 minutes against both Barcelona and Real Madrid away from home. They lost the game against Barcelona 8-2, and they lost against Real Madrid. But obviously they were sort of breakthrough moments for him. And, you know, you mentioned about the fact that he's like Sergio Aguero. He's got that same sort of stature.
It's the low centre of gravity, isn't it, that does it? It's you can see why someone made that comparison.
Yeah, and I think that it's really interesting in terms of that's the sort of player that Watford need if they're going to play a central striker. They need someone who's going to be sort of... I hate to coin the sort of the Franny Jeffers fox in the box sort of, but I've just done it because he just never was. But that's what was asked for. But you know, they need someone that is going to make that run to the near post. If the balls are going to be coming in, fizzing in from Deulofeu from the left and Sarr on the right, they need someone who is going to gamble, and also, if you are playing by yourself, to create that little bit of space yourself quickly, and he can do that. And it will be interesting to see, you know, if all goes to plan and Watford stay up, then the plan is for him, for Pervis Estupiñán, who's been on loan at Osasuna, for Luis Suarez as well, who is another option in terms of, you know, a central striker who's been playing at Zaragoza in the second division in Spain. He's also an option. So, you know, they do have squad strengthening to do, and they don't have to spend any money to do it. So a lot is riding, you know, not only on the finances, but on the players that they can bring in if they can stay in the Premier League.
I was looking down this list of players currently at the club, and it dismayed me to find out that Adalberto Peñaranda is actually 23 now.
Yeah.
So another player that really not made his reputation, but sort of piqued interest at Granada when he first entered the Pozo family. And yet he's hardly really been seen in England. Is his career heading in the right trajectory? It seems to me like he's kind of the point at which he would break through has kind of been and gone. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. He's drifted, but bizarrely, and I suppose sort of football.
I want him to succeed, Adam. He's one of those kind of guilty pleasures, isn't he, as a player?
Yeah, he is, and he seems to be a character that if under the right manager, and it clicks, he could be someone that would be someone that the fans would really get behind as well. I think that sort of Watford fans, having known about him since January 2016. And I remember I was working, you know, at Sky Sports News at the time, freezing my nuts off. And they announced this Venezuelan wonder kid had joined the club. And trying to, pronounce his name over and over again with a frozen mouth was difficult enough. But then actually trying to find out much information about him was also a challenge. And then he sort of disappeared for ages in terms of, you know, loans at Granada, Udinese, Malaga. And then he pitched up last season, and it just didn't seem to quite work. He played against Woking and played against Newcastle in the FA Cup. And then this season, he was also given a chance early on in the campaign, scored against Coventry.
Lovely goal too.
A brilliant goal. Yeah, really, really good goal. And then a couple of days later, he went out to Belgium on loan to Eupen. I'm not quite sure how they pronounce it. That's an interesting story, by the way. That club, Qatar-owned, mix of nationalities.
Yes,
I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But yeah, and then he cancelled his loan. It seemed as if his heart wasn't in it. Came back to the club early, and that coincided with Nigel Pearson being there. And Pearson, with a very sort of open book, blank page approach, thought, well, who is this dude? And you know, he seemed to be quite a lively character. Pearson open-mindedly went, yeah, all right, well, come on then, get yourself fit, show me what you can do. And that's maybe what Watford need. And he was, you know, he was amongst the squad for that game that I went to, the Brentford game. He was going to come on, and then he didn't come on. But if they can get him fit, and, you know, like João Pedro, you know, one of the extra options that Watford have, if they can throw him on, he is the perfect sort of not being cruel, but like that Joker in the pack sort of player that people will not have prepared for. And he's worth a go. And these 9 games might be the moment that he actually guarantees himself some solidity. But I suppose it's more likely that the drift will continue rather than the other way around. But he does have a chance, and if he can take it, then you and I and a lot of Watford fans who like him and have a weird sort of attachment to a player that they've never really seen play, but was full of potential, then it might just work out. Who knows?
I think I just like saying his name. He sounds like one of those players from footballing antiquity, when it's sort of a legend from 1920s Uruguay or something like that. The last time I saw you, you mentioning Pearson just reminded me of this. It was that game against Everton, the 3-2. Oh. And for people that aren't sort of really aware of Nigel Pearson's press conference etiquette or personality, this kind of illustrates it. He came in, Everton obviously won the game 3-2, having been down to 10 men with a counter-attack in the last minute. And someone right at the front of the auditorium said, that was a bit naive of your players, Nigel. And he was like, naive how? And, that sort of weird, like, sixth gear that he has in his personality, where he kind of, it's almost like he's going to jump over the desk and wrestle you. Like he's the only manager I think that actually scares me in press conferences.
Yeah, well, I think because we've seen him go a little bit further. I think maybe in his in his defence, he has been the thing that sort of has been very noticeable for me. Yes, you're right. He doesn't like words being put in his mouth at all. He's very sort of conscious of that. But also, he does like to really explain his points in very, very detailed ways. So I think that's been quite interesting. And I wonder I think he's probably far more direct and clear and precise in his instructions to his players than he is to the media, because sometimes he can say, well, I'm not going to talk about that, but, and then goes on to talk about it for quite some time. So, I think, look, overall, from the point of view of covering Watford, I think it's made a big difference that, yes, he can be quite aggressive in terms of the appearance, but I think he's very conscious of making sure that he doesn't talk rubbish, and he's still quite honest, don't you? He's quite honest in what he says.
I think I enjoy it, but it has that element of danger. Like it's sort of it's like talking to someone who has a completely calm expression, but is absolutely seething behind the eyes all the time. It's a very strange dynamic.
But that's what you want, isn't it?
I think so. It's like it's not your average press conference with a few platitudes. You think something might happen. Something might go on here.
Yeah, but that keeps the players on their toes, doesn't it? It's the perfect combo.
So. He might snap at any minute.
Well, if I was playing for him, I think that would work. It would be sort of, am I going to run that extra yard? Yes, because I'm afraid of what might happen if I don't.
Do I really want to find out what's going to happen?
I'm not sure I want to pull at that thread. Anyway, Adam, let me just finish with a little bit of a commercial bit. Watford are leaving Adidas at the end of the season, and joining manufacturer Kelme. What's the thinking there? Is that just a financial decision, or is it part of some kind of broader commercial strategy?
Yeah, I think so. It's broader than that. I mean, we know that Watford are very reliant on central payments, as many of the teams that aren't in the top 6 are. And they need to improve their commercial revenue. The deal is supposed to be worth, if it all goes to plan, and that is, post-pandemic dependent, worth in the region of around £10 million, which is a bump in terms of a commercial partnership for the club. They had an option of an extra year with Adidas, but they wanted to have a bit more control. I think they felt that because they aren't one of the big guns that Adidas are linked with, like Manchester United, they were given more sort of template options rather than being able to be bespoke, which Kelme seemingly are very keen to offer. And I think they felt, things like seeing your kit that you have being exactly the same kit as someone else. Like it was a Polish side, Vauxhall Poltava, who played against Arsenal, and they pitched up in exactly the same kit that Watford had as their third kit. And I think it's like things like that fans go, oh, right.
There's a lot of that around at the moment, though. You see, if you look at Leicester's third kit, the pink one, that you can just buy that as a sort of a training top if you look in the right places.
That's terrible. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah. I think that it has an impact, doesn't it? It certainly does.
I think so. You know what? I mean, it's not even about Watford. I just wanted to have a rant at the state of training kits and kits in general. There's a lot of templating. I know this isn't the right forum for it, but I've got a microphone and it's my opportunity, damn it. There is an awful lot of templating going on, and no good. Just have enough respect for your football club where, you get someone to, I don't know, just put a chevron on or something. Just spend an extra half an hour on originality. Right, I'm done.
That's what Kelme is. But that's seemingly what Kelme are doing, and I think they're very, very keen to work with them. And commercially, they have sort of been given not a guarantee, because nothing's guaranteed at the moment, but that they will be pushed into Asia, into the Asian market, in particular in China. They'll get hangar space, which they didn't get before, and I suppose it's a calculated gamble to go with Kelme, and they've got a decent history to them. There's there'll be a sort of a retro audience that remember them, being the kit supplier for Real Madrid and things like that might take an interest. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, if they turn up with an absolutely rotten first kit, then then the deal will be under a lot more scrutiny. But hopefully it'll be a fun kit that is a Premier League kit, and that's a big element.
As long as it's not, I mean, nothing's going to be worse than that Arsenal kit that looks like someone's been wearing it when they've been running through brambles. That story?
Yes.
You look it up if you're listening and you haven't seen it. It reminds me of the Pearson story where he was confronted by a pack of wild dogs, and he dived into a pack of into a sort of thorny bush, and that's what he would look like after doing that. That's what Arsenal are wearing next season. That's So if you don't need to look it up anymore. That should leave an imprint on your mind.
Well, thanks a million to Adam for joining us today. Listeners, if you're not already subscribed to The Athletic, make sure you go to theathletic.com/Tifo to enjoy all of Adam's writing on Watford, plus much, much more. And you can currently get 40% off an annual subscription, which works out to be about £3 a month, or 10p a day if you're in the UK. And make sure you listen to From the Rookery End, The Athletic's dedicated Watford podcast. Adam and the team will bring you the very best coverage when Watford are finally back in action. And finally, scroll back through this podcast feed and the Athletic app to hear all 20 of our Premier League Countdown podcasts, each one dedicated to a different team. To all of you today, thank you for listening, and enjoy with us the return of the Premier League.